Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. It depends on what time I will be posting this podcast. My goal was 2:00, but that came and went. So I was having a little bit of technical difficulty and I'm working on some things. So I think it's probably going to be closer to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when I post this. But either way, greetings and good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to the third thread of the Wyrdest Web podcast, a podcast celebrating artists of all kinds from all around the globe. This podcast is dedicated to showcasing hidden artistic gems while highlighting the magical world of artistic expression as a channel of spirituality and mysticism. I'm your Wyrdest host, Caitlin Moore-Waltzer, and I myself am an artist, a musician, a dancer, a writer, a high priestess, and an animal lover. So please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and thank you for joining us today. Today is February 12th, 2023. And we're lighting up our web of interdimensional and multidimensional awareness of the world and each other with another glittery episode. We are so excited to host our second guest today, Ms.Angela Parisotto. But before we get to that, we're going to spin our first half of our thread where we will cover weekly announcements, magical seasonal influences, our moon phase, and do our global energetic check-in. So for some announcements and some updates. We do have a few today, guys. There's some things shifting around. I know it's pretty early. We're only on our third episode of the podcast, but I am going to be adding and shifting some things. So we're adding 2 new sections. One is called the Golden Dewdrop, where I will present either a piece of writing or read a short story or a poem or a myth that coincides with what we're talking about for the week. Sometimes these will be my pieces of work and sometimes the work of others. The dewdrop name comes from the beauty of just seeing those little tiny dewdrops on spider webs in the early morning. So just little pearls of hydration clinging to the web. The golden piece was named for the way the sun lights them up. So water, air, and light that refresh us and add a little spark of beauty. It's also another way of showcasing artistic work, be it my own or that of other artists, and it will mostly be other artists. I'm working out other ways to showcase my own stuff, but I will eventually be asking for submissions, so keep that in mind. We're also going to have a resource thread where we throw in a good read or a listen for folks, and we're adding this because I've had a lot of people ask me for resources that they can acquire on their own, either in book or audio form. And I'll also be adding some things like stores and websites and things like that. Not full reviews, just things, little nuggets to add to our thread. So a major announcement is our Ask a Priestess Corner is now going to be a whole separate podcast. I've been getting so many wonderful questions. And you guys probably figured out that I like to go pretty deep when I'm answering these. So it actually I had a lot of questions this week, and it came down to either only being able to post one question per week, or to just straight up turning it into a separate post podcast with just the questions. So from now on, the Wyrdest Web podcast will be posted on Sundays, and the Wyrdest Web 2.0 Ask a Priestess podcast will be posted on Mondays. So look forward to the first episode tomorrow. Please keep in mind that this is a newish sort of podcast, and the format is going to likely shift and change over time as I'm getting my bearings. Things are going to get added and dropped, altered, moved around, etc. As a reminder, also please note that I'm working on getting a visual component up and running, so stay tuned for that in the nearish future. I was told it was a little hard to hear the volume last week, so I'm trying to pace myself and make my voice a little more resonant and slow down my speaking a bit. I appreciate the continued feedback. So make sure you turn that up, right? Turn it all the way up. I'm going to make sure to turn it up too. Also, I'm sure you guys noticed the difference in sound between the first half and the second half of our podcast last week. It's because the second half was tracked in from Zoom due to the fact that my podcast platform had a meltdown when I tried to place our guest call. So it will likely be that way again for the foreseeable future. And it is that way again this week for this podcast. So just anticipate there's going to be a shift in sound quality. And I appreciate you bearing with me while I work through these technological kinks. It's a huge learning curve for someone who's definitely not technically minded, and I'm not. So in a nice announcement, our lovely Amy Baker, our guest from last week, called to tell me that her poems were seen by one of her favorite artists on TikTok, and that he did a recitation of her poetry aloud on his channel. So congratulations, Amy. This is one of the major points of this podcast is for artists to connect with other artists. So it appears that the web is being spun and it's happening. And I don't think that was actually a direct result of this podcast. I think he just happened to see her work, but the energy was out there for her to be seen. So I'm excited for her. And one more update is that we won't be having a show this upcoming Sunday because I will be going out of town to visit a friend of mine, a very dear friend I haven't seen in quite some time. So we will, the following week, though, be hosting our third guest, the fabulous Miss Christine Hajar, who's just an incredible artist residing in Rhode Island. So stay tuned for that. I'm also having a little trouble speaking and enunciating my words today. You guys, you may have noticed. I'm not sure what's going on, but I feel a little slow. So I apologize if my words are a little bit twisty today. It's just going to be how it is. So we're going to get on with the first half of our show. The global reading today. So I struggled with this a little. I landed on, in lieu of a card reading, we're going to simply cover a global event and say that our hearts are going out to our Syrian and Turkish global family who are suffering greatly at this time. The death toll continues to climb to nearly or past 33,000 people as of CNN's report 9 minutes ago. In the wake of Monday's 7.8 earthquake. And numerous aftershocks are nearly as strong and they're rolling through. So rescuers are working in the freezing cold conditions around the clock to pull people from the wreckage, including their own loved ones. The resulting homelessness and lack of resources is going to be considerable for these people. So please consider donating or contributing if you can, if you're able. And if you can and you wish to help, please visit any of the numerous organizations who are keeping a close watch over the earthquake situation. These groups include the International Rescue Committee, the International Red Cross and Red Crescent, which is Turkey's version of the Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, United Nations, World Food Program, UNICEF, Oxfam, and Save the Children, and then also IFA, Turkish Animal Rescue League, is doing everything they can to rescue our stranded and frightened animal friends as well from animal family from this horrendous tragedy. So, and if you wish to donate through a different charity of your choosing, please vet them through Charity Watch and Charity Navigator. Both of these screen charities heavily to prevent scams and fraud. So it suggested you go straight to the organization's websites and not follow links through Instagram and Facebook, etc. Just check it before you do that. I do find it interesting. I don't even want it. I'm not sure if it's tacky to link this or not, but it just feels very fascinating to me that we had the green comet shoot over us. And we did cover last week that comets are signs of chaos, disruption, and not necessarily viewed as good signs. And, the green comet hasn't been seen since the Stone Age. And now, right after it's been seen, we have this horrific event happening. So it's just a reminder that our fates are all woven together on the weirding web, right? Many strands and threads woven together to create one web. And of course, it's imperative that we keep our hearts and ears and minds open to any and all who might seek refuge in our country, no matter what country you're in. I'm in the USA, and I'm hoping that we will be welcoming people into our arms as they're coming out of this. And I'm hoping other countries are doing that as well. Just remember that as we welcome another, so we will be welcomed. And as we help one, so we will help many. Okay, so moving on to our lunar influences of the week, we're coming down off of that wild moon drunk energy of the last few days. And we're currently in our waning gibbous phase of the moon. The moon remains in the sign of Leo. And during this part of the moon phase, it's an excellent time for quieting the mind and the spirit and fine-tuning and reevaluating goals and feeling grateful for what we have and the gifts to come. And moving to our seasonal influences, I was asked last week why I did not cover Valentine's Day when I was going through the list of festivals for the month of February around the world. And I neglected to include this, and it was because we didn't really have enough time to cover Valentine's Day. And Valentine's Day it needs a bit of a spotlight, a lot more than I was able to shine on it last week, given the fact that last week's episode was a little bit long. So this episode might also be a little long, no promises. I'm going to keep the summation of Valentine's Day as brief as I can, partially out of necessity. It's a pretty convoluted holiday. Valentine's Day is celebrated all around the world, and not everywhere in the world, but a lot of places in the world. And it is a subject, again, with a lot of twists and turns and convoluted origins. Okay. So the countries that do celebrate Valentine's Day on February 14th are the United States, Canada, Britain, Australia, Mexico, Argentina, South Korea, and France. And there are some other parts of the world that celebrate. There are also some parts of the world that do not celebrate this holiday. It's mostly in Muslim countries, and that is due to the belief that the day encourages casual sex and excessive consumption of alcohol. So, places such as Malaysia, Pakistan, and Indonesia, which currently houses the largest population of Muslims, there are annual protestations actually against Valentine's Day. And in fact, presentations of chocolate, flowers, and wine, etc., on this day for your loved one can actually result in some fairly severe punishment. So, if you are not Muslim and you happen to be dating someone who is Muslim and you want to celebrate this holiday, just go ahead and check in with them first and see how they feel about it. Okay, don't just like surprise them with flowers and chocolates. It might be triggering. So just check in. So this is Valentine's Day is an interesting holiday. People claim it as there's a lot of people who think that Valentine's Day is just a Hallmark holiday, a holiday that was invented by Hallmark to sell flowers and chocolates and candies. And they did capitalize on this holiday like they capitalize on every holiday. However, this holiday is not recent. It actually goes all the way back to ancient Rome. And though it's claimed by Christians and Catholics as the Feast of Saint Valentine, which also has a really, really twisty turny origin as well, the origins kind of remain veiled in a little bit of mystery. But what we do know is that Valentine's Day is yet another holiday that was adapted by the Christian calendar from the pagan traditions. The ancient Roman holiday of Lupercalia, traditionally falling on the 15th of February, was a celebration of fertility that was the original source of what is currently known as Valentine's Day. And it was a celebration of fertility and wine and fertility related activities, and largely dedicated to the god Faunus, and also to Romulus and Remus, who were the legendary founders of Rome and were purportedly raised in a sacred cave by a she-wolf. Hence the name Lupercalia, right? Like loop in Latin means wolf, and lupa means a she-wolf. So as many Roman festivals sort of tended to do, this one began with animal sacrifice. I'm not going to get too into that because it's gross and horrible. And while I recognize that, it is a very frequent part of ancient cultures everywhere, it still deeply bothers me. So I'm not really going to get into that part of it because it's gross and terrible. Hard pass on that, you guys, for me. So, but there was a ceremony with involving blood and skins that were slapped against unmarried women in order to promote fertility. Actually, I think it was all the women to promote fertility, but the unmarried women would then put all of their names into a giant urn in the center of town, and the unmarried men would take turns drawing names from the urn, and this would dictate the couplings for the festival. So, and these pairings actually resulted in marriage more often than not. So it was kind of a if you need a bride, come to this festival and choose somebody and see what happens. It's like, I don't know. The other piece, a popular piece of mythology around Valentine's Day is Cupid. And Cupid's a funny character too, because we have these images of Cupid being this chunky little baby in diapers with a bow and arrow, okay, but Cupid actually comes from the Roman god Eros and is also the source of a lot of the mythology around the bow and arrow. So, although he was historically not a chunky little baby in diapers, he was usually like an over the top hot dude, sometimes depicted as a god, and other times he's depicted as just a really attractive mortal who had golden and iron arrows. And when he would hit a target with a golden arrow, the target would be struck with love and desire. And when he would hit with an iron arrow, it would create like an aversion. So the presence of Eros goes way back. And he's actually first mentioned, Eros is first mentioned by Hesiod. So the writings of Hesiod. So he goes way back. And the current baby version of Cupid is actually only goes as far back as the Victorian age. They liked diminutive things, and they liked to paint, pretty images on porcelain and cross stitch and stuff. So, so Cupid, Cupid, like, a cute little baby with hearts and birdies fluttering around was kind of the image that we got of Cupid. The Lupercalia was eventually overturned by the Pope and replaced by St. Valentine's Day, and Lupercalia was deemed unchristian, and I don't, we'll go into that on another day. The origins of St. Valentine's Day, though, are just as serpentine and veiled as the origins of Lupercalia. So, and the reason is because there was more than one St. Valentine, and both of them, supposedly martyred themselves for love. So, and there's no real way to know who's who or what's what, or which St. Valentine is the inspiration for Valentine's Day. And there's also a piece where people thought that mid-February, especially in France and England, people thought that mid-February was a really good time for a day of love because it was the beginning of the mating season for birds. So it seemed appropriate for a romantic sort of celebration, which is why we frequently see birds fluttering around Cupid in depictions. And while Valentine's greetings go as far back as the Middle Ages, it wasn't actually until the 1300s that the date officially became the day of romance. And then in the 1400s is when we see the dawn of the written Valentine greetings. According to some historical accounts, the oldest of these was written by the Duke of Orleans in 1415, and it's now archived in the manuscript section of the British Library in London. So if you want to go and see that, it'd be kind of cool to see the very first Valentine. If you happen to be in London, maybe go take a look just for the sake of it. And so there you go. For those thinking that Valentine's Day is merely a dumb holiday invented by Hallmark in order to sell, hearts and candy and gaudy pink and red teddy bears with sickening sayings on them like "I love you very much," you'd be wrong. Hallmark didn't invent it. But just like most holidays, again, they did happen to capitalize on it with subpar merchandise and giving people guaranteed like proverbial and literal toothaches, right? Okay. There are also some more humorous counter movements to Valentine's Day for people that are not coupled, including Palentine's Day, which is a day for celebrating your pals of all genders, and Galentine's for single ladies groups who want to go out and just celebrate each other. It's like a form of Palentine, I guess. And then there's also some like really funny ones. I personally would enjoy Mescalentine's Day, which is where you purchase a bottle of mezcal and pair it with your favorite movie. Um, so however you celebrate it, or if you don't celebrate it, it's fine. But that's the loose origin of Valentine's Day. Okay. Recording. All right, guys, welcome to our interview for the Weirdest Web Podcast, episode 3. We have our beautiful guest with us today, Angela Parisotto. Angela, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I met Angela 5 years ago, actually, almost to the month when I touched down in Seattle, and we started working on King Richard together. And then after that, we were in Lysistrata and Desdemona as well together. Were you in King Richard with me? You were.
I was not.
You weren't.
Lysistrata.
Sorry, it was like, it's all like a blur. Like the first 3.5, 4 months of like me being in Seattle was just me being in the green room in the Tacoma Strand Theater. So like it was just like, um, so we were in Lysistrata together. That's right. Sorry. And then we were in Desdemona. Angela is a professionally trained circus performer with the Gallier School in Paris, a very well-known Parisian school specific to clowning and performance. She's also an accomplished burlesque dancer, actress, and all around kind of amazing, wild, beautiful person. So, Angela, thank you again for joining me on this show. I would love to hear how you started getting into performance, if you don't mind sharing that.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. This is a great honor. So I started performing when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And my parents would throw dinner parties, those little cool 70s dinner parties. And I didn't want to go to bed. So when the music would get kind of loud, I would like to dance. And so I would go in the middle of the living room and dance for everybody. And then I would get really, really hot from dancing, but I didn't want to stop dancing. So I would start taking off my clothes. So I started stripping when I was about 4. Then my mother would come out. She'd be mortified and grab me and take me into the next room and try to explain to me why we don't take our clothes off when we're dancing. Unfortunately, it didn't stick. Been taking my clothes off when I dance. Not necessarily for money, but still do it today. And that was the beginning. So I always knew I wanted to be an actor. And my parents discussed it at length. At that time, there was a Gong show, and it was my favorite show. And I begged and begged and begged to be on the Gong show. And they discussed it and discussed it. And thankfully, they did not do it. They said, we don't want to ever squash her spirit. And we think that putting her in the limelight, putting her on TV, what if they do gong her and it breaks her heart? They're like, we want to nurture this, not exploit it and destroy it. So thankfully. And then
I'm sorry, Angela, what is a gong show? Can you, I don't know what that is.
The Gong Show, yeah. Sorry, I'm old. But in the 70s, they had a talent show of sorts, and it was a game show. And you would go out onto the stage and you would do your talent. And if you got through the 30 seconds that they allowed you, then they would rate you and score you. And whoever got the highest score won the game show. But if your talent was so horrible they couldn't get through it, then they would hit the gong and take you off stage.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's brutal. So, okay.
It's brutal.
Yeah, that's rough.
It set me up for a life as an actor and for going to Gallier. So I was prepared. I did theater throughout high school, really never did mainstream theater. Most of the drama instructors didn't like me very much, and I didn't like them. Was never a standard thespian. Just wanted to get on stage and do my own thing. I wanted to get on stage, turn on the music, and play. And that doesn't really fit into mainstream theater very well. So even in high school, I was never cast in a single high school play. So I made my own. And I played a singing trash can that was singing the blues because people weren't recycling and using me properly. And I toured it to elementary schools. So,
that's genius.
Screw high school drama. I've always made my own. And soon after that, I went to college a year early. And while there, I was working at a local burger joint in Marysville. And I was looking for a new job, make more money. And I saw this ad at the college for clowns, professional clowns. And they were paying $15 an hour, which in 1994 was a lot of money. I was making $4.50 at the burger joint. So this was awesome. Called them, I interviewed, they accepted me. They never asked my age. Didn't realize until the first night of clown school when my mom drove me down to the school, which was at that time in Georgetown, Seattle, and we lived in Marysville, so it was a little over an hour drive. And they're like, "Why is your mom here?" And I'm like, "Because I'm only 17." So it was the youngest performer that they'd ever had. This company called Clowns Unlimited. started by a wonderful man, a Seattle icon who did Leo the Clown. And he started clowning when he was 12, but I was 17, and graduated clown school and loved it. So started doing birthday parties. Eventually, years later, started doing stage shows, magic shows, things like that, corporate events, private parties. Performed over 1,000 times live in those 10 years. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. And then in my early 20s, I decided I kind of got burned out playing the same character. It's wonderful, but it's also, it's like painting the same painting every day. And it wasn't for me. And I saw all my friends like getting corporate jobs and buying cars and like being responsible. And I wanted that. Like I wanted that, I was this broke clown, and my friends were also broke street performers and fire eaters and jugglers. And we were just sort of these misfits that I was like, well, maybe it's time to stop playing and get a real job. I did not realize how mistaken I was.
Oh, the kiss of death, the kiss of death.
Yes, I should have stayed clowning. But while I was a clown in 1995, I went to Bumbershoot, which I don't know if have you ever heard of Bumbershoot, the music festival in Seattle? It's not that popular anymore because now it's like unbelievably expensive. But back then it was $20 a day, and you could see all these performances. You could see, we went to go see the Ramones. That's what we were doing. And my fellow clown friend, Eddie, we're going there, and he's like, okay, I know we're going to go see the Ramones, but right before that, there is this troupe. They're not clowns. They call themselves buffoons. And you got to see them, Ange. You got to see them. It's wild. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. So we go, and it was Umo Ensemble, who still performs today. They're on Vashon Island. They have an art center there. And I was mesmerized. It was the greatest thing I've ever seen on a stage. One of the buffoons sang an erotic song to the ingredients of a Twinkie. And I will never in my life forget that. It was so fabulous. And I knew instantly that that's what I want to do. That's the kind of clowning I want to do. They're truth speakers, but they're funny and friendly. It was just a completely different experience. And after that performance, we ran over and went and saw the Ramones. So we did get to see the Ramones that day.
That's exciting too.
Yeah. But, flash forward many years, we didn't have the internet then. We didn't have Google. I don't know how these people became buffoons, but it was always in the back of my mind that someday I want to do this. So flash forward many years, I've had a job, I've stopped performing, and it's 2015. And I have a moment in my life where I can take a sabbatical from corporate world and start pursuing dreams. And my husband keeps asking me over and over again, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do with your life? And I say, I think I want to go back to school. I'd like to be a lawyer, maybe work on immigration law, blah, 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 blah. And he rolls his eyes and says, I don't think that's what you really want to do. And then I get all upset, and I'm like, you don't support me. I have these great ideas and you don't support me. And I don't know what you want from me. And he kind of smiles and he says, I want you to ask yourself, if you have no worries, no fears, and you don't have to make any money, what would you do on this planet? What would you do in this dream scenario? And I'm still, upset because I feel he doesn't support me. And I'm like, in this mythical world where I don't have to earn a living and I have no fears, what would I do? And he says, yes. And I said, I'd be a fucking movie star. And he starts laughing and he says, because that's what you really want to do. And it's true. I miss performing. So I didn't want to become an actual movie star. Hollywood's not my thing and film is not my thing, but I did want to go back to the buffoons that I remembered in 1995. So this is 20 years later. I Googled them. They're still around. I looked at where they went to school, and it said they went to school in Paris and studied with Jacques Lecoq. And I thought, okay, let me try that. And I look at the school. You have to speak French. You have to be accepted. You have to audition. It's a 2-year program, blah, 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 blah. None of these things I'm going to do. So I Google French buffoon class in English. And what pops up is Philippe Gallier. Never heard of this dude. Never heard of him. I was pronouncing his name as Felipe Gouliou or something like that. Like, I didn't even know how to pronounce his name. I'd never heard of him, but I start reading a little bit about him and I search for him on YouTube, and there's this BBC interview of him. And there's this, tiny little old French man with a funny accent, and he kind of talks like this. And the BBC interviewer asks him, does everyone have a clown? And he said, no, 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 no. Not everyone has a clown.
Like an internal clown. Like
an internal clown, yes. But when you have a clown and your clown is near, that is when you are funny. And there was something that just hit me like in my gut when he said that, because, I had a clown and I knew what it was like, and I had put her away, and there was a big hole in my heart because she was gone, and I didn't know if I'd get her back. And it was really a sad moment. And that night I had a dream about Philippe, that we were sitting in a classroom, and I'm sitting in the middle. Everybody's in a circle and in chairs, and I'm sitting in a chair in the middle of the classroom. And he's trying to talk to me and get me to do something. And I'm getting frustrated and I don't know what he wants from me. And he says, I want this. And he reaches inside my body and pulls out a little blue light. And everybody, they start like clapping and telling me congratulations. And I'm looking at this little blue light, and I'm crying from the joy of it. It was like the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, was this little blue light. And I knew when I woke up, I got to go meet this Felipe guy, That was
Felipe.
Felipe, yes. Oh, I was so embarrassed, when I first start going to school there, and I called him Felipe, and somebody, sweet woman from Ireland, says, it's so cute, your American accent, how you call him Felipe. And I said, well, what's his name? And she goes, Philippe. Like, okay, I came all the way to Paris. I'm all the way here. I'm in class. I've been here a couple weeks, and I didn't know how to pronounce his name. So yeah. And so that's how I ended up there. And it was a great, Philippe's school. He says it's a theater school, but it is not. It is a school to help you find your inner light. It is about joy and light. When all these other acting coaches are about, theater is torture and acting is pain. And the more torture and pain that you have, that you can reveal to the audience and be more vulnerable, the more the audience will love you, is complete bullshit. Total bull. Philippe is all about, one, the audience is not there for your therapy, so take your tortured soul somewhere else. Two, the audience wants to see you be beautiful, and so be beautiful. And by beautiful is being as bright and joyful as you can possibly be. And the more joy you have, the more the audience will love you. And it was a completely different method. All of his methods are like nothing I'd ever experienced, except for watching The Gong Show. It's a little bit like that. He actually has a little drum when he thinks you're being terrible, and he hits the drum and tells you how horrible you are.
Oh my goodness.
It's a little bit like The Gong Show. Yeah. But it was a life-altering experience for sure. Yeah.
That's
so
incredible.
that was probably a long-winded explanation about how I got into performing, but
no, it's wonderful. It's exactly, this is great. I love hearing about this stuff, Angela, because, part of what intrigues me about these stories of other artists is that we so rarely share our stories with other artists, and it becomes like a hazing ritual, where nobody really tells you what to expect, what the pitfalls are, what the this, that, the other, unless you have a really dedicated mentor who's not so wrapped up in their ego that they don't want you to succeed past them. Right. Like, so, part of what I'm loving about what you're sharing is that you're describing, I think, a lot of experiences of people with this light inside of them, this artistic dream, this goal, that then has to be, squashed out by conforming to something that's soul sucking. I mean, it's soul sucking to be, a mermaid and have to go into the beehive and pretend like you're a bee when you're not. And
Right.
so, it's this kind of, and I'm talking about, guys, proverbial. Don't try to be proverbial and not literal. Some of the things I say. But I think what's wonderful about what you're sharing is that's the path for a lot of artists, and people feel alone. They feel unseen. They feel unheard, misunderstood. Like they're never going to make it. Like there's no way out. Like they're going to be stuck in these like boring, soul sucking jobs forever without a light at the end of that tunnel. And it's like you're sharing your light at the end of that tunnel and what that process looks like. I would love if you could tell us a little bit about your burlesque performance and how you got into that as well. I mean, you told us you started stripping at 4. When
Yes.
did you deliberately start getting into it, and how did that look? Because burlesque is like, you're like the ultimate sort of like delving in all the little taboo areas of performance. Like, so it's just kind of delicious and beautiful. So please, if you wouldn't mind, please share about that.
Yes, yes. Well, it's interesting you say delving into these little taboo areas because my family called me devil child growing up. So I have this like affinity to little demons and stuff, which can be a whole nother episode. But the first time Philippe spoke to me, he said I had to put this big basil mask on. These basil masks are giant. I'd never worn anything like it. And
what's a basil mask?
A basil mask is from Basel, Switzerland, and they actually have a festival, a basil festival with these masks, and they're giant faces of some kind, and you can see out of these tiny little holes. And basically, he said, "Put the mask on, go backstage. When I bang the drum, come on stage and entertain us." And that's it. So I get back there and I'm trying to put this mask on that doesn't fit my head, and I don't know what to do. So I come out, I don't know, I wave my arms or do something ridiculous. And he says, "Stop, stop, 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 stop." And he says, "You," points to me. And he says, "Take off your mask." I took off the mask and he says, You are the devil. You are a little bit evil." And I laughed. He also said, "And that was a fucking horrible performance. You are really bad at this." And I'm cracking up. And he says, "If a homeless man, if he crawled through that window right now and this homeless man, he had a gun and he bang, bang, he shoot you dead, I think your audience would thank the homeless man."
Oh my God.
And he goes around and asks every person in the class, "You, Fanunu, you drunk Irish, would you thank the homeless man?" And she goes, "Yes, I would thank the homeless man." And everybody started talking about how they would be grateful if I were dead.
Oh my God.
I'm cracking up. I'm loving it. This is how he plays. Like some people break down and start crying, but he's testing me. I mean, I look back now. At the time, I had no idea what was going on. I just thought this was so ridiculous. It can't be real. And so I'm cracking up. I think this guy's hilarious. Whereas other people are like breaking down, crying and stuff like that because they're used to Stanislavski method, where if you don't please your teacher, obviously you can't be an actor. But for him, this is how he plays. So I loved it. I loved it. And I went back, and my mother-in-law was staying with me in France because I was afraid to go by myself. And she said, "So has your teacher talked to you yet?" And I said, "Well, he did call me the devil." And she got really serious. And she goes, "How did he know? Did you tell him? You must have told him. How would he have known that?" She wasn't kidding at all. She was
Oh
like
my
dead serious.
So wait, why did your family call you devil child? Can I ask that?
Yes, I was just really wild and rebellious, and they just could not stop me. I was unstoppable. And they used to try and punish me. Like we didn't have like serious punishments in my household. Luckily, there was not physical abuse or something. And so they tried to punish me in like a normal way. My mom would spank me in the light way she possibly could. And I would turn to her and say, "That didn't hurt, hit me harder." And then she'd be like, "Okay, well, she can't do that." So she'd be like, "Okay, Angela, then you have to stay in your room all evening. You can't come out of your room and watch television. And they'd put me in my room, and this 5-year-old little girl, I would actually take all the furniture in my room and turn it upside down, including my dresser, my bed, everything. My dad said I had the strength of a gorilla. They just didn't know how I did it. So they just called me Devil Child because they didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know how to stop me. They were just like, it's the time of The Exorcist. And so my sister was like, I think Angela might be possessed. And so they were like,
my God.
It took 150 hours of therapy to recognize that I'm not actually a devil, but I embrace it. I embrace it. Like, my burlesque name is Lily the Evil. So
that's amazing.
I embrace it. Yeah.
So, okay, perfect segue. Talk to us about your burlesque adventures and your burlesque life.
Yes.
It's Valentine's Day coming up, so it's kind of a perfect little topic to cover.
Yes. Perfect time to twirl titties. Yes, for sure. Well, I'm really relatively new to it, with the exception of, stripping from the time I was 5. Certainly have stripped for my friends since then.
And Lysistrata, when we did Lysistrata, that was burlesque. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hands down. Yeah. I remember the conversation we had with Nick, whether pubic hairs were going to be acceptable or not.
Fun group conversation. We're like, okay.
These are real burlesque conversations. Like, you need to know what the blue laws are and whether you can show pubes or side boob or any of those things. Like,
that's true.
Yeah, titty twirling is complex. Yeah. Well, it actually was part of Gallier. I'd been wanting to do burlesque for a long time, but didn't have the confident body image. And I met a woman who was a plus size burlesque dancer. She's creme de la crop on Instagram.
I love that.
And she's fantastic. She is gorgeous. I mean, this woman just sweats pheromones, I'm telling you. And I just started worshiping her, and I'm just like, how are you confident? And your confidence, it just radiates through her skin. And I'm like, I want to do what you do. And she's like, yeah, I do burlesque. And she does clown burlesque. And she's a comedian, and she's multi-talented. And she showed me a video of one of her performances, and I was like, I want to do that. And you know what? She can do it. I can do it. And so I started studying here in Seattle, and I can't remember the name of the school. They're not around anymore, though. But I took a burlesque series from them, how to walk in high heels, how to put on makeup, and how to twirl your titties and all that kind of stuff. But I still hadn't performed yet. And I went back to France, and they were doing a cabaret of sorts. And one of the guys that was putting it together heard that I was getting into burlesque, and he's like, hey, do you want to do this? And I sent him a picture of me twirling my titties with tassels with my arm in the air going, yes, me, I want to do this. And soon after I accepted that assignment, Paris had a train workers strike. So I lived a 30-minute train ride into Paris, but a 2-hour bus ride into Paris. And the buses were completely full because people are trying to commute. In short, I couldn't get to Paris for a month. And I had no supplies. I had no costume. I had no nothing. So my roommate had a sewing machine, and I went online to say, how do I make, the pasties with the little twirly mechanisms? And I'm like, okay, you need fishing supplies, you need a craft store, and you need hot glue. And I had all of those in that tiny little town. So I got the fishing supplies, I got the craft stuff. Oh, the hardest thing to find was the carpet tape, because that's how you keep them on. But I did find it. I found it in this little town. I had some lingerie that I was able to cut and make little bows out of, and so that I could easily take it off. And I just did it. And I loved it. It was so fun. My fellow classmates were very supportive, and I was like, this is what I want to do. So after that, COVID hit, and I haven't performed since. I had one booking that, but because of COVID, they went online soon after. They just canceled the show. But once it went online, I was like, I'm not going to do burlesque in my living room online with no audience. First of all, that's porn, and I should get paid for it. Second of all, you need the audience to inspire you to take stuff off. Like, you need their cheers and stuff. Otherwise, it's just porn in your living room. Yeah. So yeah,
basically, yeah. And there is something very alluring about that sort of like speakeasy, dark sort of. When I think burlesque, I always think of like that, like sort of 1920s sort of dark cabaret sort of style, where like people are sitting around in their zoot suits and their flapper dresses, just like having, drinking whatever the heck, slow gin or whatever it is they, did, smoking Lucky Strikes, like watching like these like, beautiful, classy yet also risque women that are, up there just kind of showcasing. And I always have this like sort of 1910, 1920s kind of vision of that, even though I know it goes back farther than that. But that's my vision when I see it, is just like this like sort of speakeasy kind of style environment. And it just is so alluring. It's like, we need to revive that. Like, we need to revive that. Like, that is like a fun thing. Yeah. Because modern day strip clubs are just gross. Like, they're gross.
Because they're about sex, whereas burlesque is about playfulness, for one, performance, and it's an art form, and it's about body positivity. So it's very pro-woman. Often the burlesque troupes are run exclusively by women. It's and they don't make as much money. I mean, really, stripping is porn, and there's a lot more money in porn. But that's also a whole nother segment about the degradation of women in porn. But burlesque, in my opinion, is completely opposite, and it's full of droopy skin, chubby, middle-aged women like me. It is full of that, and we're bombshells.
I'm gonna just go ahead.
Flipping bombshells.
Disagree with your description of yourself, because I've known you for 5 years, and I'm looking at you right now, even though this is not going to be visually apparent on YouTube for the podcast. You're gorgeous. Like, you are curvy, but you look like a pixie. Like, it's hard to describe, you guys. She's got this flaming red hair. She's got these beautiful star earrings, not a wrinkle on her face, like perfect shape. Like, just, yeah. So I disagree with your description of yourself. Having been actually in a burlesque with you as a burlesque performer myself the first time, like, that is incorrect. You are not those things.
Well, I do say,
and it's okay if you are.
Yeah.
Yes, you are a bombshell.
I am a bombshell. But like everybody thinks of Dita Von Teese, which, no diss on Dita Von Teese. Wow, what an incredible woman. And I'm thrilled that she brought burlesque into everybody's home. But they think that, some people who don't know burlesque think that that's what burlesque is going to be for them. And it's not. We are normal looking women showing our beauty within, emanating through our skin, and our joy and our love for being on the stage and being exhibitionists and flaunting it all. And that's a lot of where the beauty is, really.
Right. And then you go back and you look at dancers like, as for example, Mata Hari, okay? Incredible burlesque dancer, not really a great beauty, but sort of lauded as a great beauty because her presence on stage was so captivating, and it had nothing to do with what she looked like. It had to do with what she was emanating, because she's really, I mean, if you look at pictures of her, she's cute, whatever, but she's not notably beautiful, really, at least not in my opinion. But, and also she was a spy, but also like but she's up there, just kind of giving it all she's got, and knowing how to work an audience, knowing how to look at people, knowing how to captivate them and draw them into the movement, and give them an escape, which is what performance is about, giving people an escape from their everyday lives in some way or another. It doesn't matter what the performance is, if it's burlesque or if it's traditional stripping or if it's a music performance or if it's, people go because they need that escape. They need to look at something other and experience the other, and burlesque has such a taboo sort of shield around it, like that people are like, oh, it's true. And, as a tribal fusion belly dancer, which is one of the things that I practice, it's very interesting because people all, because of the way that belly dance costumes are, there's often a reveal of like skin, and people will confuse it with burlesque. And there's like a line with belly dancers. They will get so upset if you call them burlesque dancers, which is fair. They're two entirely different art forms. But for the public audience that doesn't necessarily know that aspect of it behind the scenes, right? What they're comparing is that they're being drawn in by the sensuality of movement and the curves of a woman's body. And that's not to say that men can't belly dance. There's some amazing belly dancing men and some incredible belly dancing or burlesque men and non-binaries, right? Again, we don't do gender definition on the show like humans, but there is something very, very similar in the sense that people, as they're watching, they're drawn into another world that they might not have access to otherwise outside of that. So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And my Gallier training, the shows that I'm putting together now, I have a little journal in which a song inspires me, are very Gallier-like, because he was also about not just laughing for the sake of laughing, but you have a platform, and buffoons speak out against the king. This is what they do, and comedians can do that as well, and sort of point out the hypocrisy of society and things like that. And so my Gallier training, after going to Edinburgh Fringe this last August and seeing the influence of Gallier in fringe theater in Europe, blew me away. And I'm like, yeah, there's so many aspects. Like, I'm putting together a show now about I'll be dressed as a German Shepherd in my burlesque routine.
That's
or
amazing.
One where I'm going to have Donald Trump speaking out of my butthole, So
my mom is listening. She'll be listening to this, and I know she's going to appreciate that.
Yeah. And there's also, like, burlesque right now is facing some similar things that the drag queen community is also facing. Certainly not the violence that the drag queen community is facing. I don't want to compare that. But just the regulation of our bodies. Every man in the audience could be topless and show their nipples, but me as a burlesque dancer can get hauled off to jail if I show my tits, if I actually show my nipples. And these are sexist laws that, when challenged in state Supreme Courts, don't pass, but we still let them be the way they are. I can't show pubic hairs. I can't show this or that. And it's just ridiculous, because, there are men walking around. I went to the grocery store, and there's this man who's got his pants so far down his butt and no underwear. I mean, he's mooning everyone walking around the grocery store, but I can't twirl a naked nipple. Seriously.
Right. Professionally, right?
Way more interesting to look at.
Well, and also people are like deliberately going to look at your nipple, and they're not going to be assaulted by its presence, whereas people are assaulted by your plumber's crack. They're assaulted, sir. Sir, pull up your pants.
And it was more than a plumber's crack, and it was in the produce department. Seriously, I don't want to touch anything that butt was near. It was disgusting. But I can't show a nipple. And so, there's a real attraction in burlesque for me, because it is political as well. Yeah,
it is. And while this isn't a political podcast, it's kind of hard to avoid the politics of this, because it's the classic demonization of a woman's body being a temptation to men and drawing them somehow away from the divine, when we in fact are the embodiments of the divine. Okay, so there's that piece. And then it's also like the puritanical ideas that are almost Victorian around like sexuality. Well, sort of Victorian. There's a whole other thing there too with the underground like sexuality movements in Victorian England, which were really terribly creepy because they were so repressed. But also just like it's the classic demonization of the female form and like what we evoke, which is the feeling of life, of sensuality, of pleasure, of motion, of like procreation and creation in general. Which is very triggering to people who think that that's somehow dirty and evil, when it's in fact completely it's natural. It's what makes the world go around. And it's very interesting to see the response of people that are not in touch with themselves in that way be confronted with things like this. So it is absolutely political, historic. It's political, not just now, but historically all the way back to,
Right. And it's not party political from this standpoint. It is, you know, the oppression of women's bodies is across the board, always has been. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah, and God forbid you be a woman in her power that doesn't fit the mold of the magazine standard of beauty who's evoking those feelings too, because then it becomes like, you know, the response of like, oh well, I can't be attracted to you because you're not the classic form of attraction that says it's okay to be attracted to. And that, you know, fortunately, there's some very enlightened people in the world who don't feel that way. And they're coming out more and more and more and like standing up against this classic, ridiculous beauty standard. But I love that burlesque breaks those standards and does evoke those feelings, because we have to look at that side of ourselves, guys. We've got to look at that side. And this is going to be easy for the younger folks in my audience to hear, a little more difficult for the older ones who have had to live under those paradigms of oppression. So, and this is just what it is. This is what it is right now.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, thank heaven for Lizzo. I don't know if you've heard any of her interviews.
Bless her.
And she really, she talks about the discrimination against, you know, fat women. And I was like, wow, that's never been talked about that I know of before, the discrimination aspect of it and what she gets in trouble for that skinny women don't get in trouble for. And wow, she's just really opened my world, really. Yeah, love that woman. So props to her.
Totally. We have 2 minutes, so I'll crop this end part out. Hold on. Okay. Saying recording.
Okay.
There we go. All right. So guys, we took a quick break. Now we're back. So we were talking about, I'll probably edit out this part and the end part of that other video and just like tease them together. But I realized something when I was upstairs just now that I did want to share, which is that I keep saying on my podcast, which so far, you know, fortunately is only, this is the 3rd episode in, but I keep saying that this isn't a political show, but I also just realized upstairs, staring out the window, drinking my tea, that there is literally no way to divorce art from politics. There isn't, because so I don't know why I was saying that. So officially, I'm making this announcement. This is no longer a non-political show. I think I was trying to, you know, I'm a new podcaster. I was feeling a little tender about getting backlash and blah, blah, but like, actually, I don't care, because I myself am an artist and respond to politics as well. So no longer is that a thing in my show. We're no longer a non-political show. We are a whatever show. So we're currently discussing the demonization of women's bodies and sexuality. And I did have a quick question for you. When you were in Paris, what was the difference between the French regard for those things and the American regard for those things, for that topic and subject matter?
That is a very interesting question. I was thinking about that earlier today. And first of all, sex is very French. Sex and death actually are very French. There's sort of, Paris, in my opinion, is very a city that is feminine. And it's all about beauty and these beautiful buildings and beautiful flowers and beautiful water. But it's also built on top of hundreds of thousands of dead people. So there's this darkness to it. And their sexuality is really tied into that, into beauty and death and beauty and death and beauty and death. And as for women, there are still some battles of oppression of women there. When COVID happened, there was really a problem with women not going to work anymore and being stuck at home with physically abusive men. Oof. And, you know, that's a problem worldwide, not just France, not just the United States. The oppression of women is everywhere. But sexuality is not oppressed in France. It's still misogynistic. I think some of their commercials really objectify women and are degrading to women, in my opinion. But you want to show your tits in Paris, you want to take your top off at the beach, go for it. Like, there is nothing wrong with having a body. In fact, they have laws, or at least they tried to have laws. I don't know if they actually did this, but they were going to ban the full burqa outfit, the swimsuits on the beaches, because they felt that was oppressive to women. Well, I think that's bullshit. If a woman wants to completely cover up on the beach, great. She wants to take everything off on the beach, that's great too. But I also think what was interesting for me is I felt safer in France because it is just a less violent country in general. We live in one of the most violent countries in the world. So I felt calmer there. However, I had far more creepy men follow me home and approach me in the middle of the night after going to a bar than I'd ever experienced in the United States. This misogyny is so open there that as an American woman who is being followed by some dude, completely freaks out about it. I don't know how French women feel about it, but I also thought it was interesting that many of the other female students experienced this, yet none of them that I know of had actually been assaulted by these men. Whereas in the United States, if you get followed down a dark alley by a couple of guys, chances are you're going to be assaulted. So it's interesting. It's just a completely different thing. But they don't hide children from breasts. There's breasts everywhere, nude people everywhere, art everywhere. That's just not part of their culture. They're not oppressive from that standpoint. But are they still struggling with violence against women, misogyny, the objectification of women in the media? Absolutely. They're struggling with that as well.
Very interesting. It's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I wonder too how it must be for them viewing, America or the US as such a puritanical, we're based on like blue laws and puritanical foundations, at least the existing part of our country right now, not the ancient, obviously, but in which we were not here. But I wonder what they must how they must view America as being so oppressed in the sense of like the sense of the human body. Angela, hello.
Oh, well, they judge us immensely on that. I mean, French people judge you anyway, but certainly a lot of judgment and misunderstanding. Like, how in the world could you find the human body gross? Like the human body is what brings pleasure, and everything French is about pleasure and beauty and all these things. I think what's interesting is I do not speak French fluently. But I was told, and maybe I'm wrong, that the word vagina in French is actually male. So there's lu and la when you describe an object, and lu is masculine and la is feminine, and something about the vagina is male. So it's sort of, there is still some misogyny to be dealt with in their country. But for the most part, they're very logical and reasonable and don't understand why Americans can't be. Why are we so it's as if we're behind the times, like we haven't evolved to being mature adults yet. That it's just, mostly we don't talk about women's rights there, but everybody wants to talk about, Donald Trump and violence against people of color. That's mostly what people bring up with me when I'm there. They're like, or flat out, I've had people say, what is it with your effing country and their effing guns? People flat out come up to me and say that. I'm just like, wow, that's a big conversation.
It's a big conversation. Yeah. And not to get off the topic, because we can come straight back to it, considering, but just to loop back around, the word vagina actually means a sheath for a sword. That's the root word of it from the Latin. So it is inherently a misogynistic word at all. And French being a Latin-based language, it's interesting that they would masculinize the word in that way, because vagina has an A on the end of it. So it's the feminine, but the meaning of it is a sheath for a sword. That's what it is. Which is just
Wow. That's terrible.
it's just
We
like,
need to come up with a new
what?
word.
I know. Well, there was another word that I'm not even allowed. If I say it and it gets posted on YouTube, my channel will probably be shadow banned. But you know, providing anybody sees this, but you know, there's a nice 4-letter word that starts with a C that I personally think is fantastic, and it actually comes from the root word meaning cauldron, which of course is the representation of the womb base. So it's a great word, but of course it was banned and demonized by our you know.
Yeah. Oh, I love that word.
So it's a great word.
Love that word.
Great word.
Yeah, that's a
it's a great word.
Yep, I'm gonna start using that word from now on.
Yeah, I filter myself when I'm here.
I like it. I like it. Yeah.
That word was, yeah, it is great. And it's used pretty freely, I feel like, in places like Ireland and England, and they're not so oppressed with that word. But for some reason here, it's completely taboo. It's way more taboo than the F word. It's like, you said what? Like, and it's like,
yeah.
Yes, the power word. It's the power word for women.
Even by women. Even by like I mostly have women that look at me going, I don't like that word.
Right. Yeah. Right. And of course it's come to mean something derogatory. So if you say it, it's an insult to call somebody that. And it is kind of funny as an insult. But you know, it's come
to
mean.
Did I lose you?
Oh, I don't think so.
I can't hear anything.
Damn it. Can you hear me?
Oh, I keep losing you. I can't. Are you there?
It says my internet connection is unstable. Yes. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. We're having some internet interference here in the backwoods. And can you hear me, Angela? Okay. So I think, yeah, that word's come to mean something insulting and terrible.
Yeah, it might be a little delayed, but I can hear you.
Oh, it's totally delayed. I just asked you that like 30 seconds ago. Hold on.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. It's funny. I think there was a Facebook meme around there. Somebody from Australia said, it's so funny, you know, here in Australia, I mean, Americans are offended by our use of the C word, but here in Australia, we're super offended by school children being massacred with automatic weapons.
Yeah. And what does a gun look like? I ask you, what is the shape of a gun?
As America, we're so obsessed with.
Are you there?
I can see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and you sound better too.
Okay, yeah, yes. You do too. Okay. I think my computer got offended by our conversation.
That's great. That's great.
So I do, guys, I am in like literally the forest with some wonky ass internet. So if it's going out, I'm like mad because I love this conversation. So I'm gonna have to try to splice some stuff together when I track in the conversation to make sure it gets all in. But yeah, it's interesting how that word means something offensive when the root of it is actually not an insult. It's very, very interesting. And how professional textbooks are fine using the word vagina, because that is how extensive the repression of the feminine has become throughout the course of time.
Yes. Yes. Well, think of all the things that have been considered bad and taboo because they're feminine, you know, menstrual blood. You know, most religions have some sort of comment about the dirtiness of a woman who's menstruating, or her mental state, or how a man shouldn't be near her, and things like that. And yeah, breastfeeding in public.
It's probably true that men shouldn't be near us, but not for that reason. It's a whole other reason, because y'all are annoying. Just kidding, sort of, but not like, best not to aggravate us in that phase. Best not to.
Yes. Yes, I agree. I read something somewhere that said that during this time when a woman is menstruating is when her hormone, particular testosterone, I think it is. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I want to check because it's being recorded, but testosterone levels are at their highest. And so it's the period of the month when a woman acts most like a man. Is during her menstruation. When she's
Aggressive,
menstruating. Yes,
demanding,
yes, yes.
narrowly
Look at how,
focused.
yes, we're so offensive when it's the one time of the month when hormonally we're closest to men.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, and it's everything has been so you know, demonized when it comes to the feminine. So I think a lot of what we're seeing right now is sort of a rebalancing of that energy, but it looks pretty gross right now. It's like lancing a cyst because, both energies are out of whack, masculine and feminine. They're both out of whack. Otherwise, we wouldn't be perpetuating cycles with each other that are so
Yeah.
toxic. So, and I think people are waking up to that. I feel like
Yeah.
I see a lot of men, women, and non-binary humans waking up to this complete imbalance and being like, what is happening? And it's causing quite a rift. And I think art, in the way that we can utilize art as a tool to express what's happening around us, because that's what art is. It's the expression, at least in my definition, it's the expression of like what is happening around us, what is happening within us that we share when we don't have the words to describe. A picture will, or an image of some kind will encapsulate 1,000 words, right? So having that as an outlet, the
Right. Yeah.
burlesque and all of those types of art, belly dancing, the things that embody the sensuality of the divine elements of the feminine, right? The nurturing, the presence, the warmth, the strength, the lioness strength that comes out, the willingness to fight for what we want to protect, for what we love. That comes out in our dance. It comes out in our art. It comes out in how we dress. It comes out in how we address people, right? And it comes out in how we treat ourselves and how we allow ourselves to be treated. So those things are healing right now. And I love this
Yeah.
conversation because it's such a mini expose on such a mini channel, very minimal exposure right now, where we can be free and talk about this. And for me, I have this fear of just like our whole society heading into our own version of the Handmaid's Tale, and I'm not interested in living that life. So these conversations are important right now.
Yes. Well, it's interesting you talked about the demonization of women and also demonization of artists. And I have this whole affinity for demons and devils. And some of that is because what we consider demonic isn't actually demonic. That we don't call serial killers demons, but we call women devil women, you know? Wasn't it Victoria Woodruff, the first woman to run for president? She was described in an article as a devil woman because she had a husband and a lover and was a free lover of the Victorian era. And I think what's interesting is that you have to think of who benefits when someone is empowered and someone speaks out against oppression and they start educating the people around them like buffoons do. This is what buffoon, the basis of buffoonery is they are children of the devil and they are truth speakers, and that's why they're called children of the devil. And they embrace this, and they perform mockeries of it, and they spread the real news. They say the things that other people can't say, which is, in my opinion, what comedy should also be able to do. But comedy is now being censored. And so comedians are afraid to truly say what needs to be said or what they feel needs to be said. And when they're operating comedy from a standpoint of being afraid to speak, it affects all aspects of their comedy. So for women, we were afraid to be burned at the stake if we were called evil. Like literally, these were not witches that were burned; they were women. Women were burned at the stake.
Yeah.
And today we're afraid to speak out in offices and speak out in meetings. And I'm afraid to say cuss words because everybody they still kind of look at me as a devil child. For some reason, I inspire that in them. But we don't call Ted Bundy a devil, which is evil. That is evil.
Yeah.
So I have an affinity to demons. I actually think that demons are something that we need in our society. We need these boat shakers. We need these plot shakers. We need the people who are not afraid, who have the fire in them, this wonderful element, fire, to stand up and start burning shit down, metaphorically speaking, of course.
Metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically speaking, I can say it over and over again. Metaphorically speaking. All of this is metaphorically speaking. So I think that the demonization of artists, the demonization of women is all because the powers that be are afraid of the power of the real human spirit.
Yeah, and indeed the demonization, just to ride the coattails and take it one step further, just so we're clear, again, the demonization of the feminine energy, right, at all, because there are certainly people not born women who embody the feminine energy and are also they're like extra demonized, right? Like the drag queen community and the transgender community has suffered an enormous amount of violence and discrimination, even within their own, even within the circles of the LGBTQ, I don't know the rest of the letters, I'm really sorry, community as well, not just with the cis community. So it's important to recognize that the feminine energy that has been suppressed is prevalent. It's still and even with these conversations, it's still being suppressed. It's still being suppressed. We're not the only ones talking about this. It's certainly a global conversation right now, and movements are happening. And, we talked earlier when we were privately talking about the documentary, This Changes Everything, about, women artists in Hollywood and the whole journey. And by the way, guys, if you haven't seen that, that's on Netflix. I believe Gina Davis was involved in producing it. It's brilliant. It's very eye-opening, and it's alarming. So if you have a chance to watch it, please do. But this is the conversation right now. This is the global conversation, and art is an avenue, one of many avenues, but certainly a prominent avenue of being able to get our expressions out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and thank you for defining it as feminine energy, because I'm not talking about gender necessarily here. It is definitely the feminine energy. You can have been born with any gender, but whatever you identify with, whatever you embrace. Again, I go back to drag queens. In many ways, I see drag queens as American versions of buffoons. They definitely point out hypocrisy. They had to live on the outskirts for many years, and they are truth speakers and little demons with their feminine energy, so I love them for that.
Yeah, as do I. I have a huge affinity in my heart for the drag community. Angela, I have a quick question. What can you describe the difference for people between a buffoon and a clown?
Absolutely, yes. So a clown, historically speaking, even going back to Native American times and Egypt, in tribal times, there were these keepers of light, keepers of joy, light keepers. I'm trying to think of the many different descriptions, but basically these were the angels. These were the ones that kept people smiling and laughing in the darkest times, that could bring joy with their presence. And that is what a clown is. So when people say I'm afraid of clowns, I say no. Well, I mean, there are people who have clinical psychological problem with someone dressed as a clown, but in general, those without that affliction, it is common now for people to say they're afraid of clowns. And I say, no, you're afraid of a bad person dressed like a clown, because saying you're afraid of clowns is like saying you're afraid of angels. Clowns are the angels of a society. And buffoons were, by society, called children of the devil. And they were the rejects of society, prostitutes, unwed mothers, people born with deformities, people who were gay, Jewish people, during these times were definitely considered outcasts. And they were pushed out of the village basically because nobody wanted to take care of them and deal with them, and they were wrong and bad. And so they would push them to the outskirts. Philippe says, sent to the swamps. He always talks about sent to the swamps, and they lived in the swamps. And while they're in the swamps, they're like, wait a minute, but isn't Jesus supposed to love all of us? This was a Christian society, and isn't Jesus supposed to take care of us? Somebody will come for us. Somebody will love us because Jesus teaches us to love each other and take care of each other. Well, when no one came, and in fact, the villagers, when they tried to go back, were said, no, you're evil, you're bad, you're children of the devil. The villagers had to say that in order for them to fit this into their religious belief system. If they told each other that they were children of the devil, that relieved them from any responsibility of caring for them. And so they go back to the swamps and like, well, wait a minute. They don't think we're people. They think we're children of the devil. Ho ho. Does that mean we can do anything we want? Does that mean we can say anything we want? Does this mean that their Christian laws don't apply to us? Ha 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 ha. Let's go back into town and tell them what assholes they are. And so they did, and they did it in the form of comedy. And they were, in many ways, the first news spreaders too. And they were able to talk about the king and queen and incest amongst the royal family and all the things the royal family's doing. And everybody's going, ha ha ha, look at what they're saying, ha ha ha. Because they were children of the devil, they were allowed to do that. So they were the first real truth speakers in modern society. So that's the difference. Clowns, they imitate joy. They imitate life in order to bring joy. Buffoons tell it like it is. They're truth speakers, and they do it through making you laugh.
I love that. And is there a difference between the costuming as well, traditionally, between clowns and buffoons?
Absolutely. Yeah. So clowns want to be lovable, and so you're going to have a kinder costume. There's the American circus whiteface or Auguste style, and then you have the hobo style from Europe. But all of them are lovable and kind. Whereas buffoons look a little bit more monstrous. You cover your mouth in black paint or charcoal. You put charcoal all over your face. Often try to add deformities because you are trying to look more monstrous.
Deliberately.
Yeah. And definitely buffoons are not for children. That is not Philippe didn't even allow children in the performances. He was like, they're not even allowed to watch. This is an adult show. And some clowning is adult shows too. But stereotypically, clowns can go either way, but buffoons, not necessarily. They're talking about adult subject matters. Yeah.
Okay. That's very telling considering how, liberated the French society is around certain things that they wouldn't even let their children into the buffoon shows. That feels like, that feels very telling and fascinating. Yeah. We are almost out of time, Angela, but I wanted to ask you a quick last question, which is, what is your definition of art?
Art is a very precious expression of sort of the energy of the universe. And it should hopefully make you feel something and make you think. And I think that true art is extremely rare, more rare than diamonds, yet isn't valued in the same way. We can have buckets and buckets of diamonds, but someone who creates a fabulous show at Edinburgh Fringe that you'll think about for the rest of your life, and it was totally impactful, you paid $10 for. It's weird, but I think that art is and I think that it's a self-expression of the universe's energy as it flows through you.
That's a beautiful definition. Angela, thank you so much for your presence, your time on the show. I would love to hear, what are you doing next? Do you have any projects upcoming next? I know you are coming out of your COVID hibernation and we're talking about jumping back into the burlesque scene. Do you have any plans for for performance in the near future?
Yeah, I do not have any specifics set up. So definitely, I would like to do some fringe festivals. I would like to bring my boss bitch burlesque show somewhere where I'm dressed like a German Shepherd. Yeah.
I love that. Well, keep me posted. I'd love to have you back on the show when those things are up and running so we can link people to your work. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you, and I really appreciate everything you brought to this show today. You're just a marvelous human being. So thank you, Angela Parisotto, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. You're
You're
amazing
welcome.
too.
Oh, you're
Thank
sweet.
you.
Thank you.
Shout out.
Thank you again to Ms.Angela Parisotto for gracing us with her illustrious presence. We are going to add our community resource right now for people who are looking for something academically brilliant, somewhat well known, and absolutely it's creating a hole in your personal library if you have not read this yet. The book is called The Women Who Run with the Wolves, or sorry, it's just Women Who Run with the Wolves by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. It's a fabulous academic study and deconstruction of the feminine psyche through the telling of modern and ancient fairy tales. So if you have not read it, um, please do. It's fascinating and it will enrich your knowledge base. Okay. We're going to close today with our Golden Dewdrop, which is our poem by Rita Dove called Heart to Heart in light of Valentine's Day coming up. Heart to Heart. It's neither red nor sweet. It doesn't melt or turn over, break or harden. So it can't feel pain, yearning, regret. It doesn't have a tip to spin on. It isn't even shapely, just a thick clutch of muscle, lopsided, mute. Still, I feel it inside its cage, sounding a dull tattoo. I want, but I can't open it. There's no key. I can't wear it on my sleeve or tell you from the bottom of it how I feel. Here, it's all yours now, but you'll have to take me too. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Wyrdest Web podcast, a podcast dedicated to showcasing hidden artistic gems and highlighting the magical world of artistic expression as a channel of spirituality and mysticism. Don't forget to tune into our Priestess Corner podcast. It will be available tomorrow on the same YouTube channel, so check that out. If you wish to interview as an artist, you can email me at catwsb@yahoo.com and type in the phrase Weird Artist, WYRD. And in the subject line, if you would like to submit a question, same thing, same email address, and type the phrase weird question in the subject line. If you wish to support this channel, you can check the links below. I realized I've been saying that and have completely neglected to actually post the links of anything that I'm saying I'm posting to. So I will make sure to do that. And make sure you tune in next week when we will be, the week after next week, when we will be hosting another fabulous guest, Christine Hajar. I am your weirdest host, Caitlin Morrow Walter. And until next week, keep it weird, guys.